naming Diyos. Maraming salamat po sa buhay at lakas na aming taglay, sa liwanag ng kaisipan at sa pagkakataong maipagpatuloy ang pag-aaral ng mga kabataan. Gabayan po ang bawat isa sa amin. Anuman ang bahagi na aming gagampanan, naway maging maayos at matagumpay ang pagtuturo at pag-aaral na aming gagawin sa araw na ito. Patawarin mo po kami sa aming mga pagkulang at pagkakasala, at sa aming paggawa, ikaw po ang aming makasama. Amen. Panginoon po namin Diyos, maraming salamat po sa buhay at lakas na aming taglay, sa liwanag ng kaisipan at sa pagkakataong maipagpatuloy ang pag-aaral ng mga kabataan. Gabayan po ang bawat isa sa amin. Anuman ang bahagi na aming gagampanan, naway maging maayos at matagumpay ang pagtuturo at pag-aaral na aming gagawin sa araw na ito. Patawarin mo po kami sa aming mga pagkulang at pagkakasala, at sa aming paggawa, ikaw po ang aming makasama. Amen.
Good morning, senior high school students of Valenzuela City. Valenzuela Lab in Practical Research 1 welcomes you. I am Lyn F. Mariano from Parada National High School. Come and join me as we venture on another learning experience. Are you ready? Let's start! We are now on the week 4 of the 4th quarter, which is about data collection and analysis procedure. At the end of this session, you are expected to meet this most essential learning competency of week 4, quarter 4, to plan data collection, data gathering instrument, and analysis procedure. Let us begin today's session by analyzing this scenario. A group of researchers wants to find out how young learners learn English by just watching movies and browsing the internet. They observe that young learners imitate or use the language they heard and use it repetitively while they are unaware of doing so. Questions. Number 1. What are the observations of the researcher? Number 2. What type of observation do you think the researcher used? And number 3. Do you think they have better results if they use questionnaires instead? Why? Why not? Let us check your answer after we discuss data collection and analysis procedure. At this point, let me congratulate you on having your working title and research problem, as well as your sampling procedure. The next step is your preparation for data collection and data analysis. Are you going to interview your respondents? Will you proceed to participant observation? Or will you be using observational tools, biography or autobiography, or even a questionnaire as your tool to collect data? For you to address your research problems, you should be able to appropriately identify the data collection techniques suited to your research problem. The following are the primary data collection techniques: interview, participant observation, focus group interview, observational evaluation, biography or autobiography, and questionnaire. Let us discuss them one by one. The first is the interview. The research participants in an interview are podded to talk about their experiences, feelings, beliefs, outlooks, etc. Interviews can take the form of informal conversations, open-ended interviews, or in-depth discussions. It can be one-time interviews, multiple interviews with the same participants, multiple interviews with various participants, or group interviews. If you choose interviews as your primary data collection method, keep in mind that they can be structured, unstructured, or semi-structured depending on your research design. Let us talk about structured interviews. Here, there is a set of questions planned and created in advance by the researcher, and he or she then codes the responses during the interview. It is more formal and standardized. In unstructured interview, the researcher uses open-ended questions, which the research participant answers freely. It is a type of interview in which the researcher asks questions that are not prepared in advance. Instead, questions arise spontaneously in a free-flow conversation. It is flexible, more informal, and personalized. While in a semi-structured interview, the researcher uses both closed and open-ended questions. It is a type of interview in which the researcher asks only a few predetermined questions, while the rest of the questions are not planned in advance. The next primary data collection technique is participant observation. Here, the researcher immerses himself or herself in the natural setting of the research participant. The third data collection technique is focused group interview. Here, there are 6 to 8 people participating in the interview. The fourth one is observational evaluation, wherein the researcher may or may not participate in the activities of the group being observed. He or she observes and records both the verbal and non-verbal behavior of a person or group of people. The fifth data collection technique is biography or autobiography. In this technique, the researcher uses personal biographies because they offer a rich source of data or evidence that can shed light on research questions. The last primary data collection technique is the questionnaire. Here, the researcher uses a questionnaire as a more formal way of gathering facts, data, and opinions through well-constructed instruments with very clear purposes, directions, and print. Now, according to Creswell 2003, here are the basic types of data collection that you need to consider in collecting your data that will help you answer your research problem. Observations, interviews, documents, and audiovisual materials. Let us discuss them one at a time. The first basic type of data collection is observations. Here, the researcher takes field notes on the behavior and activities of research participants in their natural setting. The researcher records the activities at the research site. He or she may take the role of a non-participant observer or a complete participant. The next type is interviews. In this data collection procedure, researchers may do the following: conduct face-to-face interviews with participants, do telephone interviews of participants, or via online platforms like Google Meet or Zoom, or engage in focus group interviews with 6 or 8 interviewees or participants. The third type is documents. These take the form of public or private documents. As for public documents, researchers can take any of these: newspapers, minutes of meetings, and official reports. For private documents, personal journals, diaries, letters, and emails can be used to collect data from the participants. Last is audio-visual materials. This includes photographs, art objects, and videotapes. And now that you have been able to collect data from your respondents or participants, the next thing to do is to analyze them. So here are some of the data analysis procedures that you may use to help you evaluate the responses of your participants. We have coding, recursive abstraction, and computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software. Let us start with coding. The researcher reads the data and marks segments within the data. This may be done at different times throughout the process. Each segment is labeled with a code, usually a word or short phrase that suggests how the associated data segments inform the research objectives. Let's take this example. The question is, what in this course helped you the most? And the response is, I appreciate how much the instructor encouraged us to voice our opinions and to ask questions in class. As much as possible, he took the time to respond to everyone's questions and opinions, to explain concepts, and then to make sure everyone understood his answers. This helped me because I felt like I was being heard, and I became more involved in learning the material. After reading the response, you may now start marking the segment within the data. So, you will have the following segment with its corresponding code. I appreciate how much the instructor encouraged us. Encouraging expression of viewpoint. Voice our opinions and to ask questions in class. Encouraging questions. He took the time to respond to everyone's questions and opinions. Responded to questions. Explain concepts. Explained content. Make sure everyone understood his answers. Check for understanding. I felt like I was being heard. Student feels valued. I became more involved in learning the material. Student feels involved in own learning. So there, your initial coding is as follows. Encouraging expression of viewpoint, encouraging questions, responded to questions, explained content, check for understanding, student feels valued, and student feels involved in own learning. After the initial coding, read the codes again and analyze whether there will be new codes that will be associated with more than one of your initial codes. You may label this as your final code or focused code. From our example, encouraging expression of viewpoint, encouraging questions, and responded to questions can be coded as encouraging student participation, while explain content and check for understanding can be coded as presentation of content. Last, student feels valued and student feels involved in own learning can be coded as student empowerment. So, to the question, what in this course helped you the most? The coded responses are, number 1, encouraging student participation. Number 2, presentation of content. And number 3, student empowerment. Can you follow grade 11? Good job! The next data analysis procedure is recursive abstraction. In this analysis procedure, the researcher summarized the data sets, then further summarized, and so on. There is a 6-step guide in using recursive abstraction applied to the qualitative analysis of interview data, according to Polkinghorne and Arnold 2014. Step 1. A set of interview questions are developed. Here is the interview question. Do you believe that implementing green practices is costly? Before we proceed, allow me to define green practices. Green practices are activities or actions that are employed by an organization with the aim of protecting the environment and reducing its carbon emissions. And the response is, yes, it is expensive. We have just finished bringing in a new fleet of lorries. I am concerned those things that will be beneficial without breaking the bank, such as driver training courses, are going to be implemented by us and those things that just aren't cost effective we can't even consider. The answers to each question are being recorded and written up into a transcript. Everything of interest is highlighted. The highlighted answers can either be partial sentences or phrases as shown on the screen. Step 2. Transfer the highlighted data into a table with the question topic on the left vertical axis and a column per interview across the top or horizontal axis. Make sure each individual point is separate. From our response, we have 3 points to consider. And these are, number 1, yes, it is expensive. Number 2, those things that will be beneficial without breaking the bank, such as driver training courses, are going to be implemented by us. And number 3, those things that just aren't cost effective we can even consider. Step 3. Paraphrase the data to make it more concise and manageable. Be careful not to change the meaning of the data. Try to keep a sense of the interviewers or participants' original response. That is, for the original response, yes, it is expensive. The paraphrase response is expensive to implement. While in the original response, those things that will be beneficial without breaking the bank, such as driver training courses, are going to be implemented by us. The paraphrase response is implement affordable actions. Examples, driver training courses. Last, in the original response, those things that just aren't cost effective, we can even consider. The paraphrase response is ignore non-cost effective actions. And now you will see on the screen the paraphrase data for the response to the question, do you believe that implementing green practices is costly? Moving on to step 4, where possible, combine questions on similar topics to form themes. These themes are created by the researcher and, although driven by the questions, may not relate exactly to any question. Thus, from the paraphrase response, a theme has been formed, and that is cost for implementing green practices. For the step 5, code the remaining responses for each interview. Codes can be easily compared to each other and maybe a single word or multiple words. However, I only presented one response here. You may repeat the previous steps for the rest of the responses depending on the number of respondents or participants you have. Repeat steps 4 and 5, combining themes and condensing the data as much as possible. Look for common links. Moving responses between themes is acceptable as part of this process. Thus, we condense the paraphrase responses as expensive and affordable actions only. Last, step 6. During the interview, certain control data will have been collected. Example, company size, company sector, gender, age, etc. Rearrange the order of the columns using each of the control data variables to look for patterns in the responses. For this example, the columns will be sorted so that all of the small companies are together and all of the large companies are together. This is then repeated based upon sector, location, etc. Look each time for patterns in the responses. Example, all of the small companies might say that implementing green policies is too expensive, whereas all of the large companies consider the cost to be acceptable. When patterns are spotted, return to the original transcript to validate meaning has not been changed. So that's it for the cursive abstraction. Did you get it, grade 11? I hope so. Moving on to the third data analysis procedure, computer-aided qualitative data analysis software. These programs enhance the analyst's efficiency in data storage and retrieval and applying the codes to the data. Here are some of the softwares that may help researchers analyze their data. We have here NVivo, MaxQDA, Provalis, and Atlas.E. Let us now go back to the scenario given earlier. A group of researchers wants to find out how young learners learn English by just watching movies and browsing the internet. They observe that young learners imitate or use the language they heard and use it repetitively while they are unaware of doing so. Question number 1. What are the observations of the researcher? They observe that young learners imitate or use the language they heard and use it repetitively while they are unaware of doing so. Question number 2. What type of observation do you think the researcher used? The researcher used observational evaluation. And number 3, do you think they have better results if they use questionnaires instead? Why? Why not? No. In a research dealing with subjects' behavior, such as this, it would be more appropriate to use observational evaluation instead of a questionnaire. That's it, grade 11. Great job! Let us now wrap up today's session by highlighting this day's newly learned concepts. What are the primary data collection techniques used in qualitative research? The following are used as primary data collection techniques: interview, participant observation, focus group interview, observational evaluation, biography or autobiography, and questionnaire. What are the types of data collection? Observations, interviews, documents, and audio and visual materials are the types of data collection. What are some of data analysis procedures to use in analyzing qualitative data? Coding, recursive abstraction, and computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software are some of data analysis procedures to use in analyzing qualitative data. Before we end this session, let me just remind everyone to answer activities in your module. Flashed in the screen are my references. With that, thank you very much for joining me today in our learning expedition about data collection and analysis procedure. Once again, this has been your Practical Research 1 teacher for today. Goodbye for now, grade 11. Stay safe and healthy. Have a nice day.